Hi everyone, and welcome back to Science with Ilana. I haven't done a video in a little while, so thank you for watching. I want to do some special shout outs today to Simi and Evan as always, and Max and Millie, and Andy and Olivia and Matthew and Emma. And today I also want to say hi to Noah and to Maya. And I hear that Noah and Maya have been finding some worms outside in their yard and are a little bit interested in learning more about worms. So I happen to have here at the museum, I'm gonna show you, this cool green container. And guess what's inside? A lot of worms. So I thought it might be a good time to show you some of the worms and why we have them. So I'm gonna take the top off and show you what it looks like. This is sort of like kind of a blanket. And if I lift the blanket up, there we go. We have some red wiggler worms living in this little compost kit that we have. So inside we have a lot of soil. There's lots of different worms right here, all on the top and also in the bottom. And we have some kind of old vegetables and fruit that the worms are eating. So I'm gonna pick up a worm so that I can show it to you. Let me just dig around and see if I can find a nice one. Here we go. So these are called red wiggler worms, and they're pretty small. So here it is, moving around on my hand. These are a little bit different than the earthworms you might find in your yard. But all worms are part of a group of animals called annelids. And worms do not have bones in their body, so they are an invertebrate, and they are soft. But worms are actually really important on planet Earth. And they do something for the soil and the dirt that people can't really do. They will break down plant matter, anything that's sort of decaying. They will eat it up. And of course, here it comes, because you know I love to talk about poop. They will poop it out, and their poop is actually dirt. So worms help create new healthy dirt, and they also help keep the soil healthy because they make burrows and they dig holes, and that helps aerate the soil or bring oxygen and air through the soil. It helps make little holes and tunnels for rain to come down when it rains outside. So worms are actually really important. This guy's pretty covered in dirt. Let me see if I can find a better one. Worms are really important in helping to keep soil healthy. So anytime you find a worm, I know they're a little bit weird and kind of wiggly, but worms are very good for soil. So here's my little red wiggler worm. Now, do any of you know how worms are born? Worms are born from eggs. So they will lay eggs, and after about 3 weeks, the eggs will hatch and a little worm will come out. And actually the little worm, when it's first born, is probably kind of clear or white. Now these red wiggler worms can live to be maybe 3 years old or 4 years old or 5 years old even. So they can live a little while. And they like to live in dark places. They don't like sunlight. They don't have eyes, so they can't even see sunlight. So they live where it's dark. They like the soil to be sort of cool and moist, which means it needs a little bit of water, because worms actually breathe through their skin, which is so cool. They don't have a brain like we do. They don't have bones. They don't have eyes, but they are alive, and they are really important to keeping soil and the forests healthy for plants to grow. And they're a very important group of decomposers, the animals that break down all the dead leaves and fruits and parts of plants and turning it into soil. Now, worm poop has a special name. It's called castings. So worm castings are what you might find if you keep worms in a compost pile at home but it's all a part of how the worm lives its life underground. Now, these worms in here are eating some carrots. They like to eat, you might recognize this, an eggshell. See that? There's fruit and vegetable scraps in here, and they're doing a really good job of eating it all up and breaking it down and turning it into nice new soil that plants would be happy to grow in. Worms live all over the place. There are some worms that live in water. There are some worms that live in land, live on the land, I should say. But I always was wondering, where I live, what do worms do in the winter time? It's so cold outside. Well, worms will dig deep down into the soil or the dirt as far as they can go, a couple of feet, sometimes as much as 3 feet, and they will secrete sort of kind of like an oozy mucus that will coat their body, and they will sort of curl up underground, and they will secrete a protective layer of slime or mucus, and they will stay there the whole winter, and they sort of go to sleep. They kind of like hibernate underground for the whole winter. And then when it warms up and the ground thaws out and it's not so cold anymore, they will start to kind of work their way up through the soil and get to work eating plants and anything else that they find in the soil. And the whole process starts all over again. So thanks for being curious about worms. Even though they're a little bit weird and wiggly and kind of slimy, and they don't have eyes and they don't have a brain, worms are really important. So I'm glad that you've been noticing them in your backyard. Spring and summer is a great time to go looking for worms, and sometimes after it rains, if the ground gets too wet, the worms will sort of come up to the surface, because even though they need moisture, you don't want it to be too wet for worms, because they don't like that either. So, you know, keep an eye out for worms this time of year around New York. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for watching Science with Ilana. If you have animals that you are curious about, or a place in the museum that you would like to see, or a diorama, or something that you have a question about, let me know, and I will see you next time. Happy exploring. Bye.